Hello students, my name is Mrs. Claire Mpund Chisambo. First of all, let me appreciate the Minister of Education for according me this privilege to stand in front of you, all S2 students of the Republic of the Seychelles. What I'm requiring from you students is the undivided attention, because the topic we are going to look at is very important, not only in our assessments, but also in our final exam. So, the topic we will look at is the structure of the earth. And in this topic, we will look at main parts of the structure of the earth, and we will describe their specific features. Then we'll place emphasis on the parts of the earth, especially those that float. And this will establish a basis for the plate boundaries and the related features that we'll consider in future. So, the hot topic, the structure of the earth, will be taught in 2 sessions. And in both sessions, we will look at these terminal objectives. The first one, we will know the main parts of the earth. Then, we will come to know the characteristics of each layer of the earth. When I say layer of the earth, I mean the parts that we'll identify in the first objective. And then, we'll come to understand the difference between continental and oceanic crust. And finally, we will look at the world's major plates. So these 4 objectives that I've given you are the objectives for both lessons. The lesson that we're discussing now and the one that will follow next. So let's focus on today's lesson. We will look at the objectives that are involved in this lesson. Still, we're looking at the structure of the earth. But we'll take the 2 first objectives from the terminal objectives and we'll divide them into 3. And these are the objectives we are going to look at. We are going to use the diagram to identify the main parts of the earth, that is the inner core, the outer core, and the mantle, as well as the crust. And then we are going to compare the relative thickness of each layer of the earth. And finally, we'll describe the characteristics of each layer in terms of their state of matter and temperature. So, let's get started. The main parts of the earth. The earth that we live on was formed some years ago, and it is believed that it was a liquid rock. Then as time went on, it started to cool, and after it cooled down, its surface became hard and it became the thin crust that we are living on. And under the crust, that's where we have the mantle, and at the center, we have the core. So this created what we call the 3 main layers of the earth. And the 3 main layers are 1, the crust. Then 2, the mantle, and number 3, the core. However, the core is in 2 parts. There is the outer core and the inner core. So, if we are to establish the point here, like let's say in an assessment or an exam, you meet a question on the parts of the earth, and the question is, identify the 3 main parts of the earth. Simply put, the crust, the mantle, and the core. These are the 3 main parts of the earth. However, if the question came and you are asked to identify the 4 parts of the earth, that is when you are going to label them as the crust, the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. So, we've looked at the main parts of the earth. Now, we want to see the picture. This is how the earth that we live on looks like. Outside, I'm sure you are able to identify or see the green as well as blue color, showing continents and oceans. So this is the crust where we live in, the first layer. Then the orange big part there, it is the mantle. And inside there we have two colors. One is a bit bright and the other one is pale yellow. So the first one is the outer core. And then at the center where we have the bright color shining there, that is the inner core. So in short, this is how the Earth looks like, and these are the main parts of the Earth. Now that we've looked at the main parts of the Earth, this brings us to another objective, the thickness of the layers of the Earth. We want to look at each layer. We want to know how thick it is so that we'll be able to compare one layer to another. So we will start with the crust. The crust is usually between 10 kilometers and 60 kilometers. In fact, this is the thinnest layer of the Earth. Then the mantle. The mantle is the thickest layer of the Earth. It has the diameter of about 2,900 kilometers. So when you look at the crust and the mantle, we said the average thickness of the mantle, the crust is 50 kilometers, whereas the mantle is about 2,900 kilometers. So you see that there is a difference of about 2,850 kilometers, showing that the mantle is very thick. What about the core? We know the core, we already discussed that it includes the inner and the outer core. So when we look at them as one, they'll give us the diameter of 6,378 kilometers from the surface, that is from the crust. However, we will discuss them each, like we'll start with the outer core. It has the thickness of 2,200 kilometers, and the inner core has the thickness of 1,220 kilometers. So when you look at the four parts, still the mantle stands to be the thickest with 2,900 kilometers, followed by the outer core, which is 2,200 kilometers, and the crust is the thinnest layer. Now, students, the point we want to drive from this objective is that about the thickness of the layers. You may ask to differentiate or to compare, so to say. You may ask to compare the thickness of the layers. So simply put, the crust is the thinnest layer of the Earth, and the mantle is the thickest layer of the Earth. And if you're asked to compare between the core, the inner and the outer core, simply put, the outer core is thicker than the inner core. And this brings us to the next slide. We are able to see the diagram there, showing the relative thickness of the layers of the Earth. So the first layer, which is bluish, greenish in color, that is the crust where we live on. And it is the thinnest, like we said, 50 kilometers in diameter. Followed by the one which is orange to red in color, that is the crust, that is the mantle. And we are able to see that the mantle is very thick, because if you look at where it starts up to where the outer core will fit in, the thickness is very big when you compare it to the thickness of the crust. And the next one, you are able to see that's the outer core. The outer core is also thicker than the inner core, which you are seeing at the center. If you were to cut it, we'll be able to identify or see clearly that the inner core is thinner than the outer core. But all in all, we will conclude that the thickest part of the Earth is the mantle, and the thinnest part of the Earth is the crust, whereas the outer core is thicker than the inner core. Now, we want to look at the main characteristics of each layer, the crust, the mantle, the inner core, and the outer core in terms of their state of matter and the temperature. So we'll start with the crust. The state of matter of the crust is, it is in solid form. And this is the layer that we live on. This is not very hot. That is why it supports life. Plants and animals are able to live on the crust because of its temperature. And it is made up of two plates or types, that is the continental crust and the oceanic crust. Then we come to the mantle. This one is described as being semi-molten or semi-liquid. That's the state of matter. And it is the hardest layer. Now, when it comes to the temperature, this part of the earth has the temperature that ranges from 1000 degrees Celsius to 3700 degrees Celsius. Why? As you go deeper into the mantle, when you are moving away from the crust, going towards the core, the temperature increases. So the temperature increases with depth in the mantle. And because of this extreme temperature and its state of matter, semi-molten or semi-liquid, then this liquid form is affected by the heat and convection currents move into it, like we are able to see in the picture here. The picture on my left shows the segment of the earth, the parts of the earth. Now I want to focus on the red part there. We are able to see the circle with arrows showing how the convectional currents move in the mantle. And convectional currents are able to transfer heat from the part which is very hot to a part that is very hot. So in this case, heat is transferred to the mantle. And on my right side, I used a simple diagram to show how heat moves in liquids. And in this case, we are able to see a Bunsen burner down there, and we have liquid. Then on top of that liquid, there is an object that is floating. So when this heat is applied to the liquid, the convectional currents will start to move when the liquid starts to boil. So when it moves, then the object that is floating on it will start moving in the arrow that you are seeing. And this is exactly what happens in the mantle. The heat is able to move the pieces of the crust on top. That we've come to know about the mantle and the crust, that is their state of matter, as well as the temperature. Let's focus on the core. In this case, we will look at both the inner core and the outer core. So let's start with the outer core. This layer is semi-liquid or semi-molten, just like the mantle. And it is made up of iron and nickel. Then it is very hot with the temperature of up to 5500 degrees Celsius. Coming to the inner core, this layer is believed to be a solid, and because of immense pressure placed on it, it has the temperature of about 5500 degrees Celsius. So when we look at all the three main parts, the crust, the mantle, and the core, we realize that the core is the hottest part of the earth, while the crust is the coolest part of the earth. And when we look at their state of matter again, we realize that the outer core and the mantle, these are in semi-liquid or semi-molten, whereas the crust where we live on is a liquid, and the inner core is a solid, and the inner core is also a solid. So this brings us to this table you are able to see. At least it will help us to summarize the characteristics that we've been looking at: the depth, the average density, the main rocks, as well as the temperature in degrees Celsius. So with the crust, remember we said there are two types of crust, the oceanic and the continental. So the depth of the oceanic is only 6 kilometers, while the continental crust is 40 kilometers. But when we look at the average density, the oceanic is 3 grams per centimeter cubed, and the continental crust is 2.7 grams per centimeter cubed. But the oceanic crust is made up of basalt rocks, whereas the continental crust is made up of granite. What about the temperature? Remember we said the crust, both oceanic and continental, are able to support life. So it is not very hot. And for sure, the table is showing us that the temperature is about 200 to 400 degrees Celsius, unlike the temperatures of the other parts of the Earth. The mantle. The depth is 2,900 kilometers with the average density of 5.5 grams per centimeter cubed, and it is made up of silicate. Then the temperature ranges from 1,000 to 3,700 degrees Celsius. And the mantle, the core, the final part, the core, we look at the inner core. It has the depth of 5,000 kilometers. The outer core, 3,000 kilometers. But the average density of the outer core is 13.3 grams per centimeter cubed, while the inner core is 10 grams per centimeter cubed, showing us that the outer core is heavier than the inner core. The inner core and the outer core are made of nickel and iron, and the temperature is 5,000 degrees Celsius. So this table is simply teaching us that the parts of the Earth, they have different temperatures as well as different characteristics. Now, we have looked at all those, the parts, the characteristics, but I would want you to do an exercise based on the parts of the Earth. And in this case, I would love you to draw in your books. Try to draw the way you are seeing it on the picture and label it according to what we have discussed. The 4 parts of the Earth. In this case, the question is asking you to label the 4 parts of the Earth. Students, I'll be looking forward to see this work, though I am not the one teaching you alone, but other teachers, they'll be looking forward to see your wonderful work. Draw it nicely, label it nicely, and when we open, as teachers, when we meet you in person, we will check your work and see how you did this. In fact, this diagram is always, I'm emphasizing, it is always in assessments as well as exams. So please take care. So, having come to the end of the lesson today, we've established some points. We're looking at the main parts of the Earth. And these are the crust, the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. We also looked at their specific characteristics in terms of state of matter and the temperature. Students, it was nice to stand in front of you. I'm looking forward to have or to see you in the next session. So please take care, stay safe. Thank you.